Depraved New World, Aldous Huxley, he was one of the Huxleys. They were all atheists and evolutionists. Well, Aldous Huxley kind of moved in a little different direction than atheism, but he was not a Christian. And he originally wrote a book, a novel, in 1932 called Brave New World. He spoke about a world in the future. When he originally wrote the book, he said this world might come about in 600 years or so. A later edition, he said, this world could come about in less than 100 years. Okay? And now we're actually talking about this type of world. Aldous Huxley was opposed to this type of world, where through technology, the masses would be enslaved, and it looks like that kind of world's coming about. He spoke of a future. This is in 1932. He spoke of a future where people would be hatched from artificial wombs and products of genetic engineering. Like the test tube baby type thing. This is long before the technology was around, but that it wouldn't be done because it had to be done in that particular case. But the government decided that a woman didn't really have a right to bear a child, a man and a woman. Let's do away with the family, and these government-run hatcheries would produce the children, and we would genetically engineer them through modern technology and produce the kind of people that the government thinks are quote-unquote perfect people, or maybe even people who are easier to enslave. Okay? In this world, this brave new world of Aldous Huxley, human free will and individuality are long gone. Everybody is everybody's on the same sheet of music. Everybody does things the same way because they do what the government programmed them to do. So you don't try to be all that God called you to be. Everybody's all in the same boat. Humans born naturally, like us, and who are not genetically engineered, are considered useless savages. Yeah. B.F. Skinner, yeah. Timothy Leary? Yeah, and that Huxley was more atheistic, evolutionary, so he thought that atheism would bring about good big government. Aldous Huxley, who kind of moved more in a New Age direction, he warned about big government, that it would be kind of really, really messed up. But whatever the case, so regular human beings like us, who weren't products of the state's genetic engineering, would be considered useless savages. In fact, in the end of Huxley's book, a regular human being ends up giving up and just killing himself. And it's kind of like Huxley saying that man is dead. If this brave new world comes about, where man replaces God and tries to bring about and perfect, to make a master race. He's right. He wrote this originally while Hitler was doing his thing in Germany. And but if this comes about, then real human beings are as good as dead. And so he saw that as kind of the death of humanity. Obviously, we as Christians are a lot more optimistic than that. I mean, the world can get that bad, but in the end, our King knows when to draw the line in the sand and when to say enough is enough. We'll talk about that a little later. Now, C.S. Lewis in the 1940s, he talked about the abolition of man. He said that all based on an English textbook for grammar school students. Just based on that alone, because they were teaching moral relativism, through a back door in the book, C.S. Lewis, this was in Great Britain, he argued this would eventually produce a race of men without chest. a race of men without moral consciences, and that the few would control the billions. He referred to them as the man-molders of the New Age, even before the term, the New Age movement, came into existence. He said this would produce the world of post-humanity, and that science would be used to control humans, not to better the world in which we live, help us out. Francis Schaeffer, in the 1970s, warned us of what he called the death of man. He said that we in the West, United States and Europe, we now live in a post-Christian era, a time where the God of the Bible is no longer respected, and where Christianity is no longer the dominant worldview. So, rather than consulting our Bibles to decide what to do, we either consult the horoscope or our favorite atheist professor or our newspapers or CNN, whatever it may be. But he had a work called Back to Freedom and Human Dignity, where he responded to B.F. Skinner, the world's leading behaviorist, where B.F. Skinner believed that we need to get beyond the false concepts of God, free will, the sacredness of human life, or the dignity of human life, and just acknowledge that when everything's said and done, man is just mere molecules in motion. We are controlled. Our actions are predetermined by the environment in which we live and people's effects on us, as well as our genetic makeup. And so B.F. Skinner argued in the 1970s, and by the way, he's real high up in the United Nations circles. UNESCO is based on his teachings. The UN's program on education, which is, I believe, being implemented here in America and throughout many countries in the world. But he said that you need the intellectual elite need to control the masses by controlling their genes, genetically manipulating them, and controlling their environment. Now, of course, Schaeffer pointed out the two contradictions there, the two problems with that view. One is, if everybody's controlled by their environment and their genetic makeup, then so are the intellectual elite. So what makes them any smarter than anybody else? That's number one. Number two, these guys are supposed to move the world in the best possible direction. But B.F. Skinner doesn't believe in good and evil. If there's no good, there's no better and no best. So it doesn't matter what direction the whole world blows up, B.F. Skinner and his worldview, he can't call that bad. If the whole world lives in peace, he can't call that good. So how can he say we need to bring about the best possible world? That shouldn't even be in his vocabulary. But what I'm getting at is we have been forewarned that with the technology, it's like a little baby growing up in power and in strength, but the moral growth is stunted. What happens is you end up getting a gang member who has no respect for human life, and that's what's happening to Western civilization right now. Our technology is growing, but we're throwing morality out the window because we threw God out the window. And now there's a gentleman, he was just interviewed on the 700 Club. His name is Wesley J. Smith, and he warns us about the direction that biotechnology is taking and where we could be 20 to 30 years now. I was shocked to find out where we are now. I didn't know what was going on now. But Wesley J. Smith, it sounds almost, his work is called Consumer's Guide to a Brave New World. And, it sounds like a sci-fi novel, but I don't know if any of you have heard of the intelligent design movement with William Dembski and Michael Behe and some great Christian thinkers who are scientists arguing that the evidence points to intelligent design. Great scholars. Well, they're funded by the Discovery Institute. They work for the Discovery Institute. So does this guy. This is not a fly-by-night guy. The guys that he quotes are not fly-by-night guys. As weird as their views are, they're coming out of Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Boston University, UCLA. Okay? They're the bioethicists deciding what we should do. When we're able to do A, they don't even ask, should we do A? It's like, if we're able to do A, let's do it. Because they've thrown God out of the picture. Just because man is able to do something doesn't mean he should do it. Okay? I mean, I think we pretty much have the potential to blow this planet up. Doesn't mean we should do it. Okay? Okay, now, what we need to look at to address this is first we need to look at the Bible's view of the sanctity of human life. Look at Genesis chapter 1. Genesis 1 and verses 26 and 27 says, Then God said, Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Then let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God He created him. Male and female He created them. Okay? So, first thing we need to note is that man is created in God's image. Now we know in chapter 3 things went south. Things went down. Mankind fell into sin. It got real bad. Eric talked about it last week, the Nephilim. Sons of God cohabiting with the daughters of men. Let me tell you, there's a lot of scholars out there trying to say, well, sons of God weren't really angels. There's no justification for that in Hebrew. Everybody before 400 AD taught, the Jews themselves, Josephus, Philo, first century Jews, the Jews that translated the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek 200 years before Christ. They translated B'nai Elohim, sons of God, as the angels of God. Somehow, things got so bad before the flood that the fallen angels were able to take on bodily form, cohabit with woman, and produce a hybrid race. Okay? Moses tells us this is where the legends, these are the men of renown, this is where the legends come from. And you go to the Greeks and they talk of the Titans, the giants, and the offspring of the gods, and all this other mythology. And so things were really bad. Now, after the flood, only Noah and his family are left. God tells Noah, you can start eating animals, you can start eating meat. And then in verse 6, God says, Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God He made man. What He's saying is, even after the fall, even after the flood, man retains enough of God's image so that human life is still sacred. In fact, this is one of the reasons why I believe the Bible teaches the eternal flames of hell rather than annihilation of the wicked. In other words, God doesn't take non-believers and just destroy them. They exist for all eternity in eternal death, eternal torment, because human life is still sacred even if the human being has rejected the God of the Bible. Okay? Even C.S. Lewis went to town on that, why God doesn't just wipe out those who reject His Son. Human life, though fallen, is still sacred. This is why we fight abortion. Okay? There's a lot of people who think that things are real promising, that now we're going to turn back abortion. I hope they're right, but I don't think that's the case. To me, it seems like the trend is in the opposite direction. Not only abortion, infanticide, killing babies already born, euthanasia. But today we're going to be talking about the eugenics movement. The good genes is what eugenics means. People who are arguing, trying to produce a master race. And we think only Hitler thought like that. No. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, she thought that way. That's why she promoted abortion and sterilization of people that she thought were races that she thought were inferior. She was a racist. She was immoral.